It was one of the most watched televised events of this week, the presidential debate between, of course, former President Trump and current Vice President Kamala Harris. But just a little bit of a sporting comparison, because I was chatting off air with our sports correspondent, John O'Donnell, and he says, why is it that New Zealanders are so fascinated in this? We don't have skin in the game. My sports metaphor was, well, it's kind of like watching India and Pakistan play cricket. It's going to be an interesting match, even though we don't have a team in the game, as it were. And hey, I know a lot of New Zealanders so fascinated by US politics, it's as if they get the opportunity to vote. Thanks for the thoughts and comments that have been texted through to the studio. But now going to Professor Robert Patman, Professor of International Relations at the University of Otago. Robert, kia ora, good morning.
Kia ora. Good morning, Andrew.
It was fascinating, and even though we don't get to vote, just the pure spectacle of the debate, and very different than the first presidential debate with Joe Biden, of course.
Well, I don't think the contrast could have been greater. Kamala Harris took the initiative right at the outset, strode across the podium, shook hands vigorously with Donald Trump and said, let's have a good debate.
Yep.
Indicating that she was going to try to, where she could, dominate the space. And I thought that set a pattern. She was determined to keep Mr. Trump off balance. And I think from an early stage, many of her observations were characterized by calculated barbs, which Mr. Trump, he more than took the bait. He bit on it vigorously. And I think he was, as American political pundits like to say, off message as a result for much of his answers.
Of course, President Trump has done this many times beforehand. In some ways, he's the more seasoned player. The first presidential debate for Kamala Harris, although, of course, a background in law, so certainly used to taking it to an opponent in that regard. But in terms of the outcome, is it clear? I mean, different people have different opinions on it. It's certainly perhaps not as cut and dried as the last presidential debate, but people with specific political views already locked in are claiming different results from this debate. What's your thoughts?
Well, I think that Kamala Harris definitely had the edge, and I thought the two closing statements summarised that. Mr. Trump spent much of his closing vision statement responding to what he'd heard and denying some of the charges. Kamala Harris set out what she, I thought, basically, to summarize, I think Kamala Harris had a strategy. She prepared well. She showed her composure. She, I think, was very calculated in her gestures, but it was effective. She came across as someone who wasn't intimidated by Mr. Trump and seemed to enjoy the occasion. And it's what I think his base, Mr. Trump's base, will see nothing in that debate to make them desert Mr. Trump. And so I think we must be absolutely clear about that. And he's got quite a substantial base of support in the US. I think the crucial question, Andrew, is whether the uncommitted American voters, the ones who switch between Republicans and Democrats, how they viewed that contest. And I don't think Mr. Trump really set out a clear vision to win them over. But, it's still plenty of time to go. I mean, we're still a couple of months out from the election.
Exactly.
So this is just a snapshot in time. It's a bit disappointing they're not going to have a follow-up, by all accounts.
Now, is this the sort of thing that does move the needle, in your opinion? As you say, there's people who are already locked down on who their vote is, but for the undecided voter, is this the sort of thing that makes a difference? Because looking at the debate from my point of view, there was not a lot of policy. There was not a lot of,
No.
hey, here's some concrete plans. Yes, some from Kamala saying, hey, we're going to give this tax rebate, or, the average US citizen, the middle class, are going to be slightly better off because of these policies, but not a lot of substance, and probably more name calling than substance.
True, but on the issues like Ukraine,
Yeah.
I think there was some confirmation of prior positions in the debate. And on Mr. Trump resisted a question which was asked several times by one of the moderators. Do you want Ukraine to win and prevail against the invasion of Ukraine by Russia? And Mr. Trump said no. He didn't say no. He didn't answer the question.
Yeah.
He basically said, I want peace. And I think the peace in question Mr. Putin wants is Eastern Ukraine.
Yeah.
So Mr. Trump said that he'll facilitate peace within 24 hours, even before he becomes president. But before he formally takes up the position in the White House, he anticipates he can do a deal with 24 hours. Of course, this is a reference to Mr. Trump's negotiating skills, which he's not modest about, but he believes that he can settle the whole deal in 24 hours. I'm very skeptical about that, because I think it will be delusional to think that Mr. Zelensky can cede 20% of his country to the Russians and survive politically at home. Yeah. And I think he's got no intention of doing that.
When it comes to international politics, because there was a period of time focusing in what happened in Afghanistan, what's currently happening in Ukraine and Israel and Gaza as well, but the average US citizen, the average voter in the US, do they care about such things? I mean, when we look at the global picture, yes, who wins the presidency affects international relations and international foreign policy from the US, but for the average undecided voter, is that going to make a difference, do you think?
I think you're absolutely right. I think the priorities for most American voters, the bread and butter stuff, will be the economy.
Yeah.
And however, I do think foreign policy has ratcheted up in terms of importance compared with other presidential elections. And the reason is because there is no consensus on the Ukraine situation. Many Americans seem to be deeply polarized, either fervently in support of Zelensky and saying we can't take a step back and draw parallels with the West selling out to Britain and France when they effectively gave up Czechoslovakia to Nazi Germany in 1938. Yeah. People making those sort of parallels. On the other hand, those like Mr. Trump saying, look, this is a waste of American taxpayers' money. I can get a deal with Putin. While it's not spoken, essentially there'll be a land for peace deal. Yeah. So that I think that is, Mr. Trump's position is a departure from previous American foreign policy on the Ukraine, and I think it will be a subject of some discussion. I don't think it'll be a top-ranking issue. Another issue, though, Andrew, which is possibly even more potent in American politics, is Gaza. Yeah, with a lot of disaffected young people, and this, the Democrats probably have a bit to do to convince those young people, and also some of the, I think about 55 members of the Democratic Party itself, who are not happy with Biden's policy towards Gaza. So I thought that Kamala Harris didn't really, it was interesting. She basically indicated there will be a difference of emphasis without actually indicating there will be a substantive change in policy.
This is the challenge for the incumbent. Although we have a change of candidate, it's still the same regime. A lot of the problems that the country faces and a lot of the problems we're dealing with internationally, they have all happened under the Democrat watch, as it were. Yes. The problems that America now faces are problems that that have happened in the last few years. When it comes down to, I suppose, the average American, it's economic stupid. I mean, to use that famous quote again, promising a more prosperous America for particularly the undecided voter. Is it going to swing on that?
I think economics is going to loom very large, and both sides seem to live in parallel universes when it comes to the economy, because the Biden administration is very proud of its economic record, whereas according to Mr. Trump, it's the worst economy he can recall.
Yeah.
And both cite figures to back their cases up. I think the Biden administration did inherit a pretty tough situation economically. Mr. Trump did very well until the first year of COVID.
Yeah.
And that the economy was rocked by that in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing, unemployment's come down under Mr. Biden, but inflation has come down, but maybe not quickly enough to affect many Americans. There's a widespread complaint in American families, but particularly young families, that the cost of living has gone through the roof.
Mm-hmm.
Many people complain about food and grocery bills being up by 20% compared with when Mr. Biden came in. So it looks like it's going to be a neck and neck race.
Yeah. I mean,
and I'm not sure the debate's going to change that. I do think, though, coming back to our earlier discussion, that crucial constituency which both sides are keen to win over is Middle America, particularly those Middle Americans who are uncommitted and switch. And because they're going to be 10 or 15% of the vote, there comes a point where both sides have to move beyond their base to win this election.
The other big issue, I think, is immigration policy, and this is there's no shades of grey in some ways on this one, and whether or not there is enough people in that undecided voter who have a sympathy or an empathy towards recent immigrants to the United States, or for those who fear that there's wave after wave of immigrants taking all our jobs, eating our cats and dogs, as President Trump hilariously said.
That was denied, wasn't it?
Exactly,
by the local
exactly. But pushing, I suppose, xenophobic buttons of people who think we need somebody like Trump to stop all of these immigrants coming into our country. I mean, it seems ridiculous when he says it out loud, but that might be quite an effective strategy for a constituency who have genuine fears in that area, even if it's not based in reality.
Yes, but America's culture is different from New Zealand. America's built as a nation of immigrants. Mm-hmm. Mr. Trump himself is going back several generations from Germany.
Yeah.
And Kamala Harris. So many Americans have been, if you trace their family ancestry, are from somewhere else. And many Americans are proud that every year they're taking 1 million legal migrants.
Yeah.
So it's the illegal ones they're worried about. Mr. Trump did have 4 years to deal with this problem. Mm-hmm. And also, there's something else that's beginning to creep into this campaign. He personally intervened to scuttle a bipartisan deal, which was worked out under the Trump administration with the Republican Party in Congress, to come up with a bipartisan, once and all solution to this problem, the immigration, the migration problem. So, Mr. Trump scuttled that deal because he thought it'd be to his political advantage, apparently. So
he needs
that could yet haunt him, because a lot of Republicans were very upset about that. Senior Republicans like Mitch McConnell, for example, were not happy that he predicted it would rebound against the Republicans.
And hey, he's still the presidential candidate, of course. And for him to appear the strong man, it's quite the contrast between Kamala Harris, of course, who is the daughter of immigrants from different parts of the world to the United States. Whatever happens, it is going to be an interesting couple of months. Robert, appreciate your insight. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.